Hey there. Welcome to the very last project you will work on in this course. Today we're going to talk about podcasting, why we do it, some basics of podcasting, how to write the script, kind of sort of elements that we'd like for you to include, et cetera, to get you set up for this last project that you're going to work on. So why a podcast? I'm really glad that you asked. A couple reasons. So we try to introduce you to a number of different presentation styles that you'll run into in the world, right? So the first thing we did was your training demo, where you teach somebody how to do something. Then we moved on to informationals, where you teach somebody about a topic. And then persuasives, where you try to bring them around to your way of thinking. And finally, we arrive at entertaining, right? So the idea that you can, still be informational, but can also be fun and creative. And kind of interesting to listen to. And so we dabbled with the idea of maybe making you all do stand-up or telling jokes or something, and then we thought maybe that won't work out well. So what we finally arrived at, where I taught this course at Virginia Tech, was the idea of the podcast. And so it's great. People have actually really enjoyed this, which I'm glad to hear. And so basically, there's that. So the idea of how to present information, in an entertaining sort of fashion that makes people want to listen to it. But also just the idea that being able to produce, digital broadcastable content is also just a good skill to know. We're not going to get too much into the sort of, technical aspect of like podcast creation to dissemination. Like we don't expect you to broadcast this at all. You just turn it in on Canvas. But, we do want you to do the very basics. Really what we're judging you on most is your ability to sort of craft a message and be entertaining in doing that. So, all right. So the assignment itself, just this, place we'll start, is you're making a 3 to 5 minute video or audio segment. In the 4 or 5 years that I've taught this course, nobody has ever done audio. And I really want for someone to do audio because I love audio podcasts. Most people tend to do a little video, which is fine. So 3 to 5 minutes. In terms of topics, you should probably stick to something in the wheelhouse of an event that is happening at Mizzou or KAFNR, or a program that they do, or an issue, or a club, or an organization, like a happening, et cetera, et cetera. And so, don't go outside of that too much. You will work in pairs. It helps to split the work. It also breaks up the monotony of one person talking too. You get somebody else on there. And then again, because you're in pairs, your sort of, theme goes out the window, so you can, branch out and do whatever you want to do. Okay. So what to cover? In the past, we've had people cover, they kind of went in depth on their major, what it was about and why people should do it. That one's fine. We've seen a lot of events, fundraising events or philanthropies that different clubs put on, or things that KAFNR or Mizzou puts on, something you want to spread the word about that's important to you. We've seen people interview professors or other figures, sort of in the ag industry. Those always end up being pretty interesting. They're pretty short, so there's not a lot you can really get at, but they tend to work out well. We've seen, it's time for me to go to bed. In-depths on clubs and other organizations. Just tell us about collegiate FFA or et cetera, et cetera. And then sometimes people, if they really want to get good and investigative, they can decide to sort of pick apart an issue, which is kind of a more, higher end sort of thing, I guess, because it requires you sort of dissecting an issue and then, presenting it in a way that makes sense to people, and then also doing the podcast versus, even if you're covering an event, you just kind of do the who, what, when, where, and why. But anyhow, so those are all things you can do. All right. So the first thing that you'll write is the script. Okay. We're making you turn in an outline. And so the outline can be as fleshed out as you want it to be. You can turn in a full script, and that would be great. What we're suggesting is that even though you turn in a basic outline, you also go on and write out the things that you're going to say. You will find that it'll work better. So when we think about, all right, how do we organize a podcast? I've never done a podcast before. This is brand new to me. It's really the same as anything else that you've done in this class, right? There's an intro in which you try to find what should be the most interesting thing for your audience, the hook or the interest approach or whatnot. Then you introduce yourself and any guests, trying to sort of establish, credibility or what have you. And then you go over the 2 to 3 main things that you're going to talk about. You introduce those, say we're going to cover X, Y, and Z. And then you cover those points, in more detail with anecdotes or stories or statistics or anything to kind of back those up. And then you review and conclude. And you do all of this in, 3 to 5 minutes. And so in that way, it's very similar to all the other things that you've done. And there's a reason for that, because this is the method that we found that increases people's retention of the information that you're sharing. Other topics or other things to, consider, tips, like whenever you're writing out your script, you should, and this is probably the only time that anybody will tell you to do this, is write like you talk. So make it conversational sounding. Sometimes people, write like they write, and then they try to read it like they write, and, nobody talks in full paragraphs. Nobody talks with lots of clauses and stuff. And so you want to write it to where it comes out well. And so one of the things that you can do whenever you write out your intro or whatever your questions is to read them aloud. And if you can't do it, then you need to reword it. So now the flip side of this is that if you write it out, in a way that sounds like, it sounds that you write, it can come across very stilted. The opposite of that is that if you have no structure, like you don't write anything down, you're just reading some bullet points, and then it comes off as rambly, all right? And so that's actually bad. And so we don't want to sound like we're eavesdropping on a conversation between two people where it's just going in no direction. So want to make sure that all of your things are succinct and make points and whatnot. And so that's why we have you write a script. So the other thing to consider is that in your speeches, people can ask you questions to clarify at the end. Like, oh, you said this and I didn't really understand it. Can you follow up on that? In this format, you don't get that luxury. Nobody is going to stop you and say, hey, because they can't respond to you. And the other thing is that they're never going to rewind. So you got to make sure that the things that you say make perfect sense. And in the time frame of 2 to 3 minutes, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to do this, right? If you were making an hour-long thing and you had things that were confusing, I would be, a little more lenient with you. But the fact that you got 2 to 3 minutes, if it can't be clear, you probably didn't try hard enough. All right, so some notes about recording and production. Okay, and just as a caveat, we're not super down on this isn't a digital media broadcasting class. We are bare bones is what we're looking for here. But if you're going to do the visual one, people can use, in the past have used Windows Movie Maker. It's a real basic thing. It comes on most PCs, or iMovie. I think that's what it's called. I deleted it off my Mac, but I'm just guessing that that's what it's called because there's an I and it says what it does. So you can record everything with a smartphone. The quality on them is pretty great these days. Don't forget to film horizontally, not vertically, because people that film vertically should be punched in the face. And then here's the most important thing that people do that is dumb, is they make, say they make your file in Windows Movie Maker. You make your movie in there, or iMovie for that matter. That saves it in what they call a native format. So it saves it in Windows Movie Maker format so that when you open it, you can continue to work on it. Don't turn in a Windows Movie Maker file because that program is for making stuff, not for viewing stuff. And so what you're going to do is in Windows Movie Maker, when you save your workable file that you're working on, but you also need to export it to something that can be viewed. And so usually you go to File and Export, and then you choose one of the viewable file formats. And so that could be MPEG-4, AVI, movie, et cetera, et cetera. And so just as a test, make sure that you export in one of those formats and then maybe send it to a buddy that doesn't have Windows Movie Maker or iMovie or whatever the case may be and see if they can open it. Since this is one of the ones that people turn in at the very end of the semester, it can cause problems for you if you don't do it right because you run out of time real fast. And usually I write you back real quick and say, hey, we're trying to grade this and we can't view it. And then you're off ready to graduate or something and you're not paying attention to your email and then you get a 0, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, anyway, so moving on to audio. For audio, you can use those same programs that left and just, export just the audio file. Or you can use Audacity. It's free. You just drag and drop stuff. It's real easy. You can also record things with a smartphone, on an iPhone. You can use voice memos, et cetera, et cetera. So it's easy. And the same sort of thing with that is just make sure that you don't send me the native file. Make sure that you export to something that you can actually listen to, usually an MP3 or a WAV. Okay, so let's talk about visual, audio, and audio elements. Okay, and so in your PowerPoints for your various presentations that you've done, we've sort of judged you on, did you use good visuals? Like, is your PowerPoint clear? Can you read it from 15 feet away or whatever it is, etc. It's kind of the same thing in here. We're not, again, super into graphics and whatnot. But your video should not be, you and your buddy sitting on a couch talking to one another, right? There should be more to it than that if it's a video. So be sure to include graphics and pictures that you dub in and maybe talk over. You may want to have like a title slide, like if you're like, this is the name of our video is this, you could have your credits roll up at the end. And then you could also just vary your shots. Like if you're interviewing somebody, you can, have your, self like on one, and then sometimes like zoom in on, whoever you're interviewing, and then switch back and forth and whatnot. If you ever notice, like if you watch movies, especially action movies, they actually change frames like every 5 seconds or something like that. And you don't really catch it, because our brains are so designed to be like goldfish these days. But what I'm saying is, if you turn in something that's just you sitting on a couch talking to your buddy in one long 5-minute shot, probably not going to cut it in the way of visuals and whatnot. So when you're working with audio, you're sort of more limited, right? You've got, it's a little bit of a 2D sort of thing. So make sure that you include sound effects, right? And this could just be things like emphasizing the sounds of your topic, right? So if you are, doing a podcast on like a rally that happened or something, you may just include sounds of the rally, like people talking or chanting or whatever. So pull those things out. If it's about cows, like you can have cows lowing in the background, etc. Anyway, so, and the other thing is to have more than one person talking, not like I do to you, but like have somebody come in and be a guest person. So this could be you or your buddy. Your buddy could interview you. You could find other people and both of you could interview them, etc., etc. But yeah, all right, cool. So interview, and again, not super concerned with production. Just want you guys to be able to deliver a clear message that follows the outline that we talked about, that you've used in every presentation so far of an intro, main points, review. So check out the rubric. It's very specific again, everything that you would expect. You need to decide if you're going to do an audio or visual thing. This is the thing to talk about with whoever you get paired with. You need to just select the software. Whatever works for you is fine with me. I don't particularly care, whatever works. And then decide what, audio visual elements to incorporate, if it's sound effects or having a title slide or what have you. So yeah, that's all there is to it. Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. If you have any questions, we're here for you. And yeah, good luck. I'm looking forward to watching these.